HR is going through a structural shift most companies haven't fully clocked yet. We've moved from people first to process first, although some would combat that, and now into a system led organizational powered by AI. At the same time, burnout is rising, trust is dropping, and leaders are struggling to hold everything together. So the real question is, if intelligence used to be emotional intelligence, then EQ or IQ, what actually leads organizations now? So today we're going to jump into something called spiritual intelligence, and we're going to unpack the movements in the world of technology, HR, and what better person to do that? Today I'm joined with my colleague and CEO Lukas, as well as our special guest, Zhanna, a chartered FCIPD Chief People Officer and someone who's worked across 40 countries helping organizations rethink culture, leadership, and transformation. But what's interesting about her work is she's not just focused on HR systems or processes. She looks at the awareness of individuals' behavior and how leaders actually operate under pressure. This is going to be slightly different today from a HR conversation, but very happy to have you, Zhanna. Thank you so much for joining. Before we jump into all the questions I have, I would love to understand a little bit more about what brought you on your journey to today.
Thank you so much,
and
guys.
your journey to become
Hi,
a chief
everyone.
people
Thank you so much
officer.
for having me today. So, as you said, I'm Chartered Fellow of CPD, Global CHRO, and I work in different organizations across around 40 countries across several industries with focus on IT and tech. Alongside that, about 15 years, I work in coaching, integrating different approaches, working with awareness, quality of inner leadership. I call it holistic leadership. So in practice now, I combine two streams of work. So transformation of HR and culture and leadership development. And beside that, I run leadership school where I teach deep meditation practices, embodied practices, and focus on developing energy and spiritual intelligence. And beside that, I help organizations and leaders move from managing structures to understanding and shaping the system of meanings, energy, and behavior, something like that.
I love that. That's amazing. Do you think that people are able to? I know we're all spiritual beings experiencing life, right? We're not beings having a spiritual. Or what's that statement? It's
Rational.
we are all.
We are not
We
rational.
are not physical beings. We're not physical beings having a spiritual experience.
Absolutely,
We are spiritual
absolutely,
beings
wonderful.
having a physical experience. And so, one of the questions I have, because I'm very much into this, I'm very much touch into meditation. I do a Joe Dispenza meditation every single day. I don't know if you know Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's actually part of the reason of where I am today. His meditations and embodiment, manifestation, all that great stuff. But do you think that all people are able to? Because often when I've been in the corporate world and I've spoken to, say, top real corporate people who have been true corporate their whole life, and then you try and mention meditation to them, and it's such a foreign concept, and they think you're speaking crazy language. Do you think that the world is ready for
Absolutely.
enabling
Absolutely
meditation
ready.
in
You
the
know, for
corporate world?
decades, we celebrated IQ. Yeah, be smart, be analytical, be right, be predictable. Daniel Goleman came along, we remember, and said, wait, emotional intelligence matters too, your ability to read the room, to manage yourself, to emphasize. So EK genuinely shifted things. But there is a problem that emotional intelligence, brilliant as it is, it's still operating at the level of the individual ego. So you're managing your emotions, you're emphasizing within your frame, but you're navigating the game you're already in. Spiritual intelligence is capacity to sense and explore your true self beyond the ego. And spiritual intelligence helps leaders and organizations to observe their game from distance and to work with meanings. So that's why, of course, they're all ready. So it's about awareness, it's about purpose alignment, it's about systemic thinking. We have different definitions, many definitions from different psychologists, philosophers. For instance, Dana Zahar said that spiritual intelligence is something that solves problem of meanings, values, and places your actions within a wider, richer context. So it's very foundation of which both IQ and EQ. So that's why, I never met skepticism about.
So awesome. I think that's great. And for the definition, so we're looking at traditional intelligence, IQ, emotional intelligence, EQ. Now we
Yes.
have spiritual intelligence, SQ, which is something that I've never actually heard before. So thanks for enlightening me today in terms of bringing it practical to the world. But how do you define spiritual intelligence, SQ, in a
So yeah, it's,
practical, operational
as I said,
term?
it's awareness plus purpose alignment plus systemic thinking. And I work with that, creating value creation state. I call it value creation states. It's state of being from which value becomes inevitable. So we too focus on skills, we too focus on competences, but skills do not create value. The state from which they expressed does. So recipe is not a dish, map is not a territory. So it's absolutely important for us to create specific states to express and embody our skills. It's in a configuration of human system across somatic body, across emotional, across cognitive, across energetic layers and meanings that determines whether your capability actually converts into values. So that's why it's so important right now. And yeah.
So, Zhanna,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, you're doing your own training as well. You have your academy. What are the outcomes you see in the organizations that actually
Yeah,
implement
thank you so
the
much. I
spiritual
developed a tool
intelligence?
for that. I call it Compass. It's a dynamic tool that tracks value creation across interdependent dimension, across self, capacity to absorb and recover, and energy, soul, spiritual connection, meanings, soft execution, the ability to translate into tangible results, and spirit, field of trust, field of energy, shared field. And I see that we can use it system of real feedback and for navigating value. So from what skills do we have to where are we creating value right now? And I see results. I see that we focus on value creation more in that way. And we see our meanings. We understand our meanings. We understand our why of our work. So that's the result.
So this is music to my ears, and I think it's very important because if you are like a company, an organization, essentially you are an organism of individuals trying to achieve a certain thing, right? And all shared energy moves in the right direction. That's why when you see football teams who are from lower divisions beating higher division football teams, because they have that shared energy to achieve that shared goal, and they're more aligned in terms of the movement. And that's why you see these anomalies that happen quite often, and you see these companies who beat all of the odds, the companies of say 50 people able to become market leaders of companies who have got thousands and thousands of people because
Yeah.
of that shared energy field. Now I'm all of this is music to my ears, but how do you describe that to someone who thinks spirituality is all doolally and and just a bunch of hippies, talking about
Yeah.
what's nice, but actually
I've
it's
never
important
encountered
we know this.
skepticism. I've conducted over 3,000 sessions with leaders across the world. And, it's simple. For instance, you don't start with the word spiritual. You start with the question they already care about. For instance, why does your transformation program stall at implementation every single time? Why does your team have all the right skills but somehow fail to create real value? So we can start from that. And after that, we build reports and start to create value creation state. So yeah, we start from practices, we start from meanings, we start from building energy report. So that.
And then what's the process from there? So will you have to align not just leadership, but all, say, even right down to junior staff? Are we jumping into meditation sessions at lunchtime?
It's a holistic approach. So I
What does it look like?
integrated different practices, not only meditation. So for instance, transformational game. And that's my focus. That's very interesting. Maybe maybe not. I see that I need to invite you to participate. It's spiritual game Lila, ancient Indian spiritual game, very amazing stuff. And yes, I use it and integrate it with energy constellation and with meditation practices as well. But beside that, of course, we work with different levels, with body as well, with breathing exercises as well, and with mental coaching, because we need to work with patterns as well, with unconscious patterns, with mental programs and with cognitive levels. So it's integration of different levels, not only meditation practices. So I start with leaders and after that with teams. So we need to engage leaders, first of all.
And So we're at an intersection now where we are merging the workforce with the fourth component, which is artificial intelligence. Now, someone said to me the other day, actually, I was at a meeting and they said to me, the thing about AI will never be able to defeat humans because humans never die. Now, in our spiritual essence, okay, we never actually die. We our physical bodies die, but spirit lives on. And that's if you believe in that or not, it's up to you. But there's plenty of science that actually proves this as well. Now, so we are in a point where companies are now merging their physical intelligence, their emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence with artificial intelligence also. And this artificial intelligence is replacing jobs. We know that. Okay. Now, what does that mean for a company's overall
Thank you so much.
spiritual
Thank you
communion?
so much for
If that makes
that
sense. I
question,
don't know
because
if that question makes sense.
ambassador of AI. I love AI. The more powerful machines become, the more human we must become. I take positive view on AI. I believe in humanity, and I see that it's not a threat. I see it as evolutionary invitation. And my point, first of all, I want to discuss that I don't agree that AI will replace us, because markets and learning system, yes, we will need to reconfigure them into a new shape. But when it comes to work, technological revolutions have historically created more work than have displaced. And we see different forecasts and predictions. For instance, World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs project show that AI will create 170 million new jobs while displacing 9. I believe that.
I don't believe in that, though, Zhanna.
Economy is not
I
a
don't
pie
believe it.
machines will eat from. 60% of jobs now we have didn't even exist 80 years ago. So I believe that I'm absolutely positive about that. But in the same time, I agree with you. We have risks, particularly in how we move through this transition, because whether we build systems that genuinely support people in adapting and reconfiguring themselves, that's the question. How we support people to recalibrate themselves, learning system, and so on, because context matters. And beside that, we're already living through multiple layers of challenges. It's not one isolated challenge. We moving from financial instability, geopolitical challenges, wars, and so on. As a result, we produce more and more cortisol. So transition to AI doesn't happen in isolation. But in the same time, what I see, I study consciousness and conduct various researches projects on it based on scientific approaches. And I found very interesting proposition. Within every person, there are two distinct parts, android parts and human parts. Android parts runs clear logic, if this, then that. And frankly, this is the part that AI does brilliantly. Yeah, we agree. The human part lives in states. We discussed, yes, value creation states, irrational mind, our feelings, love, spirituality, sensing. And, it's interesting because insight was partly inspired by scientist Hiroshi Ishiguro, extraordinary scientist. He exploring boundary between human and machine consciousness. And he discovered that by creating artificial intelligence, we are effectively externalizing machine-like parts of our own minds and turn it into separate tool. And doing so, we are being forced beautifully and comfortably confront what remains, so the parts that cannot be automated. So AI invites us to go deeper into ourselves. AI invites us to explore our consciousness, to explore spirituality, to explore existential questions, freedom, love, life, death. So AI boost this revolution. That's why I'm positive about that. And I see leaders, I see this crisis of meanings because of AI. So that's why our next step to spirituality, and this is because of AI. AI gives us time to explore who we are, removing this small task, removing micromanagement, so we have time to explore finally ourselves. And I'm absolutely positive about that. And maybe you saw Harari speech at Davos. That's interesting because he said that we share world of language with AI, but beneath the world of language lives something entirely human, energy. So that's invitation to explore that things. So that's why I am positive about that.
That's a very interesting look at it, and I think at some point you can go, yeah, what you're saying is absolutely correct, because we are now forced to, not forced to, but we will be, when AI
Yeah.
removes the redundant work that we shouldn't be doing anyway. We're able to then be more creative, go into the arts, take a journey within. The question I have on that, though, is, are people ready? Because, not everyone, Zhanna, is sitting around having a conversation like this right now. Most of them are talking about the EastEnders. It's a program in the UK. They're watching, a TV program at night, and they don't really like to look within, because that's a scary place. It's a very, very scary place to confront who you are. For instance, if I was to ask people I know, my mum, and talk to her about meditation and whatnot, she'd tell me to F off, because it's a foreign concept. She doesn't want to face any sort of,
Yeah.
look at her pain body. Do you know what I mean? So when we talk about that, the world, I think it's great, and that's fantastic, because when you go within, you then are able to break down layers and layers and layers like an onion, which is fantastic. But I believe that that's only sort of 1% of the world are really thinking about that right now. 1%, like us on this conversation right now. And maybe I'm wrong, because obviously you're out there speaking to people lots, around this. But I don't believe that
Yes,
people are
absolutely, because
comfortable
it's
looking
scary,
within.
because they see their patterns, they see their real thoughts, their traumas, and so on. But it's evolution, it's a process. So it's absolutely normal to be afraid, absolutely normal to feel anxiety about that. It's a process. So no rush.
So what inspires you to, be in this school of thought, to be in this field? This is, HR, great, fantastic. And I did say that this is going to be somewhat of a different conversation today, which is awesome. But what inspired you to go down this route? Have you always been of the spiritual, or has that spiritual side always been magnified within you? Was that something that was forced upon you through a journey in life, or life situations?
Yeah,
And if you don't want to answer
absolutely
that
open
question,
to.
that's fine also. But
Yeah, thank you for this question.
what
Amazing
led you there?
question. It's both. So from my old childhood, I read interesting books about that, Bhagavad Gita and different Indian books about that, and about magic and shamanism and so on. And I explored different religions. So I try to explore, I try to find a journey. Yes. And but when I started working as a coach with leadership, with leaders, I understood that, yes, rational dimension is not enough. Because, for instance, your body knows better. That's why we need to include somatic intelligence. Yeah. That's why I work with kinesiology as well. During my constellation practices, I work with kinesiology, with muscles, for instance. Beside that, we need to include breathing, because it helps people to process stress and so on and so on. So that's why, step by step, I started learning different approaches. Generative coaching, for instance, I was taught by Robert Dills, he's genius, created generative coaching approach, working with states. So yeah. And beside that, yes, I had a difficult experience in my life. It was a near-death experience. And after that, I became more spiritual person, Yes. Yeah, it was hard experience, but I very grateful for that.
I believe that. Well, my, I've got a few school of thoughts that I love a good conspiracy as well, Janice. Part of me thinks that we're in a simulation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
part of me
believe in
thinks we're in a
magic.
simulation. Okay, and that's fine.
But
That actually we can create the world, and actually that simulation, because obviously if you look at quantum mechanics and quantum theory and the embodiment, and what Joe Dispenza talks about a lot, he talks about exactly right. I'm going to
it's more
circle it back. I'm going to
interesting.
bring it back to HR in a bit. But I love this topic, so this is awesome. So, and then we look at what Joe Dispenza says, and he talks about if you want to become a person, a different person, you have to become a different person. That means you have to embody completely the new person you want to be through visualization, through breath work, through meditation, and through actually going into the quantum field. And the
Yes.
quantum field is the place where all creation happens. All creation, no matter what. And it's about changing neuro pathways in your brain, unlearning old behaviors, learning new behaviors. And then when you learn those new behaviors, you don't have to learn them straight away. Joe Dispenza's done a lot of studies as well. He actually made a load of people in a academic sense. This isn't just him, with people. He's got scientists, all with him, and they had a load of people who wanted to never played piano before in their lives, and what they got is one group to visualize themselves playing piano, learning and playing the songs, visualize it in their head, not actually playing it, and then the other group to actually learn it. And the visualization and the group who were learning, they were at the same level 3 weeks later to be able to play piano than the ones who hadn't even touched the piano. So that was through visualization, through building mental muscle, mental memory. And this is something that really excites me. I've been on this journey for a good few years, and now I will say that the embodiment is the reason why I'm where today. So if we bring
Because
that
I'm
into
so
companies,
excited
so
about
organizations, we look
your
at a value.
speech about quantum fields. I need to open one secret about myself, because I was taught in quantum psychology as well by Richard Bartlett School and Frank Kinslow. So, and I use in my work assemblage point. Assemblage point is working with that quantum fields, 0 points. And when your consciousness can choose absolutely new dimensions. So yeah, I use it in, yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. I need to invite you, to participate. Maybe I will do something like retreat in Cornwall and invite you. Yeah, I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, amazing. That'd be great. I'm actually going to Joe Dispenza in Switzerland in September, which is going to be amazing. Yeah. So he's got a retreat there. But so my point is, if we're able to do that individually and we're able to embody a new life, create new lives for ourselves. I mean, there's people who have, like Joe Dispenza's been, who've gone to do these Joe Dispenza retreats and constantly worked on becoming no mind, becoming nothing, so that he become new again. There's people who've actually cured cancers. I'm not saying that this is, the guys, just an what's it called, a disclaimer. I'm not giving any medical advice here, guys, but there's people who have categorically healed themselves through these works. So they healed organs in their body, which is amazing. So if we can do that at an individual level, then surely at a collective level we can do that, right? And an organization is a collective. So that's what I'm inspired by is how do organizations get together on this when there's so many different levels of consciousness in an organization. There's some people who are completely unconscious, in their life. So how do you align that? And I know that you spoke earlier around the, you start with the
I see organizations as a field of unconscious games. I call it games organizations play. And, I am writing a book about that right now. I'm pitching it to different publishers right now. So based on spiral dynamics and psychodynamics. So maybe spiral dynamics, it's evolutionary theory about different levels, different values. Maybe you know about Frederic Laloux, teal organization. So Frederic Laloux created this approach about teal organization based on spiral dynamics, and Ken Wilber. So it's about different levels of evolutions. And beside that, I use psychodynamics. Psychodynamics explores unconscious patterns within organizations. So that's very interesting. Yeah. And and metaphor of the game, why game? Because it's like living, operating model with their own energy and own logic, what's protected, what is punished, what is rewarded within the organization. Yes, and we can use different approaches in order to change the game. First of all, we need to read the game. And yes, I use these approaches, generative coaching, creating meta position in order to observe from distance which game are you playing right now, and change the game through metacognitive architecture. So yes, we can do it. And beside that, for instance, we can heal organizational culture as a third entity through these spiritual practices as well. That's quite interesting stuff.
I mean, it's quite funny because, we're talking about the spiritual kind of, it's high energy. It's kind of goes to in the point that, if you are working together as one unit, you get much further, you get much better, And the other thing is also, I think AI, it's enabling us to think the same way. Because if you see before, and I think so a lot of organizations were very department side. This is HR, that's finance, that's marketing. And I think so with the AI, you actually start seeing, and with Same thing when you're talking about spiritual stuff, you see the connections that we are connecting so much more than we think. So I think so through the whole AI revolution, I think even when you see all the models and even the agents and how they work and they talk to each other, I think it's just opening that like, well, we shouldn't work as organization when you
Absolutely.
departmentalize. It's like, no, we one unit, we are one spirit, we are one organization, we have a one goal. And that's actually what allows you. And I think that's, that's the beauty of it as well, that, we can actually now see okay, what's our main objective and actually how we take it across the whole business and everybody's aligned. So the company become much more efficient. The organization can be much leaner in certain ways. As Antonio we have different points on this, like how many people are going to lose jobs. As I'm more positive, I'm more on your side as well. I think it's going to create a lot of work. I think it's going to be shift about what people do and how they kind of work with the technology. But yeah, it's all aligned.
I think, again, I will contest a little bit around this sort of one, we're one together, because companies like to say that to individuals. They like to tell their staff, we're one, we're a family, we're this, we're that. And they try and artificially create this culture and you have to align with it. You have to align with these values because we are all one. We're all one. But doesn't that feels that the feeling of that for me, but I'm very cynical. Okay. I'm very cynical. The feeling of that for me, the corporate world, and they're trying, driving culture and then expecting, some junior who's earning, just above living wage. So Lucas, what you were saying about, this whole culture thing and companies say we're all aligned, we're all one mission and one team, one family. It feels a bit disingenuous because, especially I can understand that like more of the smaller teams where you can buy into that and you could say, okay, we're a team of 10 people and we're on one mission because we all got together to build this one thing. So we understand that we are, and we're building something, we're going against the grain. But the sort of bigger companies, when you get up to the hundreds and even up to the 50s, 50s upwards, and they're trying to tell, this junior individual who's earning barely living wage, to get on board with the culture because we're all one mission, we're all one team. And I feel like there's a lot of fatigue for that. Whereas I felt like that would have worked back in, say, the 90s into the early noughties. But now I think there's a lot of fatigue where people just don't buy into organizations as much anymore. They see it as a transactional thing. You give me this money and I will do the bare minimum just so I don't get fired. And you pay me just enough so I don't leave. It feels like that's where the world is moving at the moment. And obviously, yeah, it is what it is. I don't have an opinion on it. But this is when I start, when I hear this whole thing around culture and creating this false culture, it sort of feels disingenuous to me.
And
What are your thoughts on that, guys?
I think you hit it right there, because you have a false culture and you have the real culture. So there's a lot of companies that have, let's say, they claim, nice posters with the values and everything, and you have job description and tells you about how amazing it is to work for us. You start working there. Next thing, after a few months, you realize, well, this is nothing what I was told about. This is nothing what I was promised. So you still have a lot of it. But I think so those organizations that are really winning are the ones they really have clear value, clear culture, and they live by it. And it goes, it goes much deeper. It's not like, a poster on the wall, oh, we are working together, we are family. I think that's the fakest thing you can say, we are family, because it doesn't work like that. And I think so also the hierarchy is very important because it's also for the right people motivates you. Yes, we all started as the juniors, but then if you are hungry and you understand how the work works, I'm going to learn new skills. I'm going to better myself. I get a higher salary and I can move up. If everybody comes to organization and gets crazy amount of money, what motivates you to go further, to further
it's very
yourself? So
interesting
that's a
topic.
lot of different
What
factors
is
behind it
culture?
as well.
I see that culture is projection of leadership unconscious layer. That's why I distinguish between two layers of culture: external rituals, behavior, values on the wall, and internal, so invisible layer, about our traumas, about our real unconscious values, about our survival scenarios. And that layer shapes hugely our decisions for justice and energy within organization and how people feel themselves. So, for instance, if founder is terrified of losing control, the company gets built around micromanagement and endless sign-off. Or if there is if there is unhealed wound, I'm
We
never
know someone like
recognized, the
that, don't we,
culture becomes
Lucas?
obsessed with external awards. So that's about, that's psychodynamics explore that. It's very interesting to explore. Yeah. I'm focused on it right now.
But then, and a funny thing, because you also mentioned is like the psychology of the business. And many times it's not even the values, it's about how people perceive them in organizations. Because you can have amazing values, but if people don't feel it, then you come. And it probably happened to all of us. You come to the new job and they say, well, these owners or, the management doesn't really do this, or, what, you're just a number to them, or, what, they really care about
Absolutely.
themselves. So from day one, if you have few people around you saying that, you are going to believe into that kind of whole conversation. And if you have people come, oh, this is actually the right place, if you're going to do this, it's going to happen. Going, wow, excited. Let me do this. Let me try that. So it's also the colleagues
Yeah.
and the perceive,
And that's
changes a
interesting
lot.
layer
How we're going to
because
be
we
also
have
performing.
two different values. We have conscious values and unconscious values. Consciously, for instance, we believe in people first. We even do right things. We try to do that, for instance. We want to implement people first culture consciously, but unconsciously, we, for instance, try to create pressure or tension because it's something familiar from our family dynamic, for instance, and we do it unconsciously. That's very interesting, to explore. And I saw it many, many times in my experience. Yeah. And, okay. So I work with founders across
Yeah, when you
many
put it that way.
companies, and I
So
can tell you
cool.
that companies that scaled with soul had one thing in common. Their founders at some point became aware of their own game. So they can explore and observe from distance the game they're playing. So if you can do that, you win. You can change the game. Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's ultimately becoming conscious, isn't it? When you're observing the game of the ego. But moving to with culture, moving to sort of how this remote world and the remote first reality works. Most companies now are looking at defaulting to sort of tracking tools because they've gone remote.
Well, first of all, I'm ambassador of
What
remote
actually works when you're
work.
building
I love
distributed
remote
teams?
work, and yes, I'm mentor of remote leadership capabilities as well. So, and what I want to say, every time I hear a company say remote culture doesn't work, what I actually hear is our leaders don't have the capabilities to lead without the walls around them. So that's a real conversation we need to be having. First of all, long before the COVID, we experimenting with virtual offices, VR headsets, gamification. So I love it. And I believe that it's competitive advantage and a brilliant opportunity to build your own universe. You're not limited by geography, by office politics, by the loudest voice in the room. So yeah, it's the question is how you create field of energy. So sorry.
I think you have I think it's a little bit of a mix. I think, uh, I think for a lot of people, especially if you work, we have few jobs and how would expected how we can do it. Then you see exactly need to have the tools and you need to have the skills to do it. But I think so. I see that a lot of junior stuff, and it's not necessarily missing on, oh, you don't speak to somebody in the office and explain your stuff, because sometimes it's much easier when you're in an environment, you hear conversation that somebody's talking about certain product tools and certain stuff, so you actually learn so much, you can absorb so much through it. But now you can have depositories and you have other, but it's a little bit different when you hear it. And I think so other layer to it is social skills, because people, especially when they finish, graduate, come to the environment, now they're sitting at home behind the laptop. Is different when they go to office and you have office politics and they need to understand how things work, socialize. It is completely different. So I think so there are a lot of positives, but like every single thing has some drawbacks as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. When navigating individuals and like you said, the office politics, it's an interesting thing. But actually, I think more so today, remote work, I believe, gives it's an opportunity for us to just focus on outcomes rather than like you said, the loudest voice in the office. You used to see that. And I've done it myself when I employed people. I've employed people who never brought really much value apart from the fact that they were good to have in the office, good people. Even though I wasn't getting a return on investment on them, I kept them for years, because they were nice people. I liked them. I liked going out for a beer with them, and they were good in the office. Everyone was friendly. They created a good culture. But was it? Because they were getting rewarded for not doing much, not bringing much back. Do you know what I mean? So there is that. And I think the remote first work really gives us the opportunity to go, okay, so what's that person actually delivering? And the reality is we can talk about spiritual intelligence, and that's lovely, but spiritual intelligence shouldn't be
So
confused with, well, be nice and just keep people around. Do you know what I mean? Or because obviously we are in a capitalist world as well. So you have to play the game of capitalism with a spiritual head. Because that's the world that we're in. And the reality is, if you are running organizations, why are you doing that to grow? Unless you're a
mm,
non-profit, but you're doing it to make money, to feed your
mm,
children. You know what I mean? Whatever drives you, but you are doing it for a certain reason,
yeah,
and
but
that
when
reason is
we
often growth in one
it's
angle or one
interesting.
area.
For instance, when I work with, for instance, in coaching session with a leader and we discuss money, I see that behind the money, everyone has different values. For instance, connection with something more. Money is like a symptom. It's not our goal. We want safety, we want love, we want relationship, we want connection with ourselves, we want something more. And money, it's superficial. We don't want money. We have why beneath money.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
you have.
go into the city of London, into the finance sector, and speak to people about like that. They'll tell you, no, we love money. But no, I get what you're saying, Zhanna. I get what you're saying. I
I
do.
think, yeah, Jana, that's like a good point. I think that's, I mean, without just talking much, we know actually with Antonio, we created an amazing tool like 360-degree reviews. It actually looks at people, not like, you have, okay, performance and everything else, but also motivational factors. Because like you said, yes, for some it can be money can be many things behind, but some people really
Yes, it's not
love to
about
learn.
money,
Some
it's
people love to do
value
something else. Some
creation.
people are to add
They want
value.
to
Some
create
people have
value.
different ways of work. I mean, you have so many different things, and I think so it's important to understand because, like, you can't just assume everybody is here for the money. People are doing it for different reasons. So I think
Well, yeah,
so.
but on that note, I mean, I get what you're saying. I understand, and I do understand, right? Yeah, we're doing it because we want to be seen. Because maybe when we were children, we were the middle child, and I'm just speaking for myself here. Do you know what I mean? I was the middle child and never got the attention. So I thought, you know what, I'll do that in the real world, in business world. But the thing is, what is the reward for that? And you said the reward is money. Yes, this is a symptom reward. So if I'm getting less money, that means that I'm less seen, ultimately. And if a company's getting less money, then they're not as successful as other companies. I'm not saying this, I'm saying that capitalism says this. Do you understand? So as much as we can say people do it for different reasons, and when you live in a world where, even if I want to impress my wife, that's what I want to do, and impress my wife, the way to impress her, the way I get monitored by that success is not because the money, is that the fact that my company has grown, we're earning more money. Not that the money's the matter, but the point is money is the actual goal. If we really look at it, money for everyone, and I know it's not, because the way we get there is different. The road is different, but the end goal, because that's the measure of success in a capitalist world. If the world was, okay, it's not
Yes,
money,
yeah.
but it's, say, for instance, you get loads of, the people who have the most water in the world, for instance, fresh water. Let's say, forget money, fresh water. That would be it. We would all be striving for fresh water, because every company that would be the system we're working within. So I get what we're saying, but we need to really break it down and be honest with ourselves. Everyone is looking for money.
No, I think so. It's not, I think so, looking for money. I think about everything costs money. So you need money to live, to survive. So I think so it's a necessity. But sometimes you come also to certain levels that you have enough, and you don't see it as a motivational factor, because it's like,
Yeah, of
well,
course.
I earn
Yeah.
enough. I have everything I wanted in my life. So for me, I have different stuff that motivates me. But
Had
yes, because it's a
all
necessity. It's like
money of that
water,
world.
it's
What's
like food.
next?
You need to
You
have
will
money to pay the bills, to
have
pay
to
the
find
rent.
new meanings. New meanings. Yeah, power or something. Yeah,
Power.
going to Mars,
Exactly.
new and new
Going to
meanings. Yeah,
going to Mars, going to get all the money on that world.
game.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think the thing is, you have. As I said, I'm very cynical, and I love HR. I think it's great, but I think there is also a lot of people in HR tell lies to themselves around what motivates individuals and all this stuff. And I think that's fine, because we have to play that game. Jana, you said that we have to play a game, and the game is that. But the reality is I believe that we should stop treating people like children, and that, we should, give them free food by creating a culture and all that stuff, and actually treat them like adults. Look, the reality is you're contracting your services to me for X amount per annum, and then people should stop treating companies like mummy and daddy, and that they owe me something. Well, look, it's been a great chat, really good. We could probably talk for longer as well. So thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. If you could leave the world with a bit of advice from your point of view, what is that, Zhanna?
My point of view, let's create value, explore yourself. Let's create meaning for yourself. Maybe one practice, for instance, imagine you are spirit playing with yourself and try to observe your life from distance. What game are you playing right now? That's the first step.
Amazing. What game are you playing right now? On that note, thank you so much, Zhanna.
Thank you so much.
Lukas,
Thank
pleasure
you.
to see you again. Thank you for joining. And sorry guys, if you have enjoyed this, and please follow Zhanna. A link to her profile is in the description.
Yeah.
Reach out to her if you want to learn more. If you've liked this as well, like it. If you've liked it even more, subscribe to this channel. We're releasing weekly podcasts on all different matters, not just the basic HR, culture, policies and all the boring stuff. As you can see, we've had a great conversation today, and we're glad that everyone's been involved. Thank you, team.
Can I add
Yes,
something?
please.
If you are watching our podcast in 50 years, please comment below, do you have a job? Thank you.